What's up, y'all? We did it. We're here. The day has come. Part 3, The Hero's Journey of Kate Hewlett. Now, although this episode was in 3 parts, could you believe that Kate and I, we recorded that in one sitting? But her story is that impactful. There's so many lessons, so much to unpack, and I really got to spend that quality time with her and hear her whole story. Back in episode 1, we heard her origin story, where we found out her values and what truly makes Kate the unique and awesome person she is today. In episode 2, things got a little tough. She lost a classmate and dear friend to suicide. Never an easy thing to talk about, but she loved this airman so much that she wanted to share his story so we could remember him, we could honor him, and she gave that very unique insight to the survivors left behind and how they cope with it and how they deal with it. And I posted a lot of pictures on Memorial Day of Ben, and it just warmed my heart when I saw those pictures myself, seeing Ben's parents invited to the graduation that their son would have attended, and seeing how Kate and her class really welcomed them in, which I know was such a huge part of their healing as well with losing their son. So, very tough episode for episode 2, but this stuff happens, sadly. This is real, raw, uncut, and I have to thank Kate for being vulnerable and letting us in, because I know a lot of people out there feel the same way and they're able to relate with your story. But ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to today, episode 3. What is in episode 3? We hear about Kate's harrowing journey on her unfortunate diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, otherwise known as MS. I wasn't too familiar with MS until I met Kate. I'm just going to be honest. I knew a little bit about it, but hearing it from her, it is not easy. And to even get the diagnosis is tough. She was in so much pain. ER visit after ER visit, wondering what is wrong with me. I think we've all been there at one point in our life, and we know how frustrating that is. But that all changed for Kate when she met one special provider, affectionately known as Dr. Badass, who helped figure out this diagnosis and restored Kate's faith in medical services. And she goes deep into the MS life. She talks about the mood changes, the weight gain, the pain, the lack of feeling in her hands. I mean, it's tough. Now, here's where Kate really shines. Now, most people can't stay in the service with that condition because it's too difficult to go on with a military lifestyle with that type of diagnosis, and understandably so. But Kate is still serving. She's still serving. She had so many people that believed in her. She had the right provider. She took care of herself, and she is so valuable to the Air Force that we just could not let her go. She's such a huge asset, and she is still kicking butt till this very day. And I think that gives a tremendous amount of hope, not just for folks dealing with MS, but anyone out there who has been diagnosed with something that could be discharged, that's wondering if they could still serve. Look at Kate. Look at what she's doing. At the end of this episode, we talk about making every day count, to keep contributing to the mission for as long as you have it in you, and to be dedicated to making the world a better place, to change things for the better. Now, Kate has taken every day of her career like it's the last day she'll ever have in the Air Force, and that makes her lethal in terms of what she brings to the table. Could you imagine spending every day like it was your last? It would be different, right? Your relationships would be stronger. You'd tell people how you feel. You'd chase the goals that you've been putting off. You'd be there for your friends and family. You'd help others around you that were struggling. If that was your last day, you would treat it so differently, right? But it's hard for us to get in that headspace. But Kate lives in that headspace. She doesn't know if she's going to keep serving. And so she treats every day just like that. And I think anyone who meets her gets that feeling from her. She wastes no time with connecting with those around her and trying to lift them up. treating each and every day like it could be her last. And so, Kate, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I want to thank you, the listener, for supporting HeroFront. We have a ton more listeners now because of Kate's journey. So I want to thank old listeners and the new. All right, y'all, are you ready to close this out? Are you ready for part 3? Seizing each day, empowering change for MS warriors, inspiring hope in the face of life's trials. And with that, let's get after it. So the last thing we're going to talk about is your diagnosis with MS, which we talked about at the very beginning, and how that relates to making each day count. So where do you want to start with that?
And we had talked about Dr. Badass and you know how she kind of connected us and brought us here, and she really kind of wanted to kind of highlight some of the things that I've been doing since my MS diagnosis, and she was a part of that. So she I think appreciated the fact that in the midst of going through kind of a difficult ordeal, there's been a lot of things that I've tried to do very hard to make sure that I am contributing as much as I can to the Air Force, because I know that my time in the Air Force could be finite. You know, when you're going through a med board, you could be removed at any point. I can be removed from the Air Force at any point. And so just being very aware of the fact that like I might have a limited amount of time where I can give to the Air Force. And so I've been very kind of aware of trying to give back as much as I can. And so one of the things that I did was kind of start this U.S. Air Force Multiple Sclerosis information and support group. When going through everything, kind of learned that there's not a lot of folks that are still serving or those that want to keep serving. And so there was kind of a lack of information that was really needed. So it's such an
uncommon, specific thing that when you found yourself in that situation, you're like, hey, I don't have answers.
Yeah.
You know, but you went through it and you're like, hey, if I put something together, anyone in my situation could reference this and have a lot more than what I had.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Because when you get the diagnosis and you're like, okay, what next as I go through this medical evaluation? Most folks who are there to offer advice are those who have been either decided to get out or been removed once they were evaluated and just that, kind of discovered that they just weren't fit to continue serving just due to the nature of their condition. And so that was really difficult because everything was, okay, you're going to get removed. They're going to medically retire you. Here's what this is going to look like. And I was like, but I don't want that. I want to keep serving. How do I keep serving? And so there was a lot of very negative information and not a lot of kind of. So it's just helpful. They just would assume you're getting out. Like there was no other option. They would just say, "Oh, you have this. Then let's talk about how you're separating." Yeah.
And you're like, "Wait a sec."
Exactly.
Could you real quick tell me like what led you to the diagnosis? Just because for someone like me, I'm not familiar with like what that looks like. Like, is that hard to diagnose? Were the symptoms obvious, or does it take a lot of testing and it takes a very, skilled doctor to find that diagnosis. So, like, I was hoping you could explain that part.
Yeah. So it is very difficult to diagnose because MS kind of presents like a number of other conditions where it's like brain cancer, Lyme disease, all kinds of things. So it is a difficult diagnosis. I guess I was lucky in that it was a little bit more clear for me because my mom and my sister both have MS as well. So it pointed your doctor in that direction, the family history piece. Yeah.
What led you, if you're comfortable sharing?
I'll share it all. Yep.
What led you to say, I may be experiencing what my mom and sister have. I need to get this looked at. Like, what symptoms arise that led you to that conclusion?
Yeah, so it started out with abdominal and side pain, which was like really weird and nebulous because it was either like in the center of my abdomen or on my left side, and your internal organs aren't on your left side. And so the doctor I had at the time was like, running through a bunch of tests, and like we weren't getting anywhere with it, and like had no idea what was going on. And this was like December of December of 19, I think. So like COVID was really just starting to become, kind of a nationally known thing. And so there's a lot of delays in medical appointments because they're like, well, we're only, we're not seeing new patients. We're only going to see our current ones. And so there was tons of delays. There were times where I was like ready to go to the ER, and I had never been to the ER in my life. But I was ready to go because I'm like, I can't see this doctor. Like, this pain is crazy. Something is going on. And I'm just not getting any answers. But then they're like, please don't go to the ER because, at the time, it was, again, very, very scary and very risky with COVID as we were just trying to figure out and understand what was happening. And so eventually just kind of learned how to deal with it. But in that, they ended up finding, like, I had a kidney stone, which actually wasn't causing any issues. It was just there, which didn't know that you could have kidney stones and it not actually be causing a problem. And so I had to be in a down or DNIF status. So DNIF, duties not to include flying. They now kind of call it down. So I was in a down status for a while as they got a waiver for the fact that I had a kidney stone. And then, so I'd been down for a little bit, got brought back up, and then went on a flying TDY, great, awesome TDY, just working with some of our most incredible soft partners, and just so blessed that I ended up getting to have that experience, and came back from that. They automatically put us into like a precautionary quarantine, and so I was at home, I was taking a shower, and I'm like, my abdomen's numb. I was like, well, that's weird.
It was numb.
Yeah, so like pins and needles, like when your arm falls asleep, kind of numb. I was like, that's interesting.
That is weird.
And then the next day I woke up and it was my abdomen and my left pinky. And then the next day it was my abdomen, my left pinky, and my left ring finger. And so I called up my doctor at that point and I said, so fun new development. This is what's going on. And he said to me, and I kid you not, perhaps your bra is too tight.
Oh my God.
Now,
I couldn't have even guessed that. It's so insane.
Yeah, like, I mean, I know I have a tiny woman brain and all. However,
Oh my God.
I've been wearing a bra for quite a while, and
on behalf of all men, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
And it just, I don't want to say this to like pretend like this is kind of a standard experience, but it just very funny in that. Clearly did not understand that something pretty serious was going on, and kind of some of the reaction that sometimes I think women experience where their symptoms are kind of dismissed, which is bizarre. Like, women birth human beings, and somehow we think that they're weak,
and
which
you
is crazy.
wear a bra every day.
Yeah, I'm like,
and he's never worn one, most likely. But my point is, like, why is that your go-to?
I couldn't tell you. It's like, I'm not sure I need you to explain to me how a bra works, but just so you know, that's not how a bra works.
Right.
So
like, wouldn't you know that?
Yeah, it was very frustrating, and especially after like almost a year of trying to figure out why my side had been hurting, and getting nowhere. I was like, all right, I am done. Like, you and I are not talking anymore. Like, this is not happening anymore. And I had been seeing a nutritionist because I was doing like a health type of thing, and he was just like, look, I'm not a doctor, but like I deal with the body. He's like, I got to tell you, that's not a good thing that's happening. He's like, I'd go to the ER and see what they have to say. And so like the numbness had been progressing. So it kept like moving down my hand to include more fingers. And then eventually, it was like my toes and my legs and the other arm. And so ended up going to the ER and talked to the doctor. He did, some pretty extensive, just kind of motor skills type testing that they do to assess things. And he's like, we'll do blood work and lab work and all that. And then he was kind of running through a series of questions and asking about family histories and stuff. And so when he came to the question of, is there a family history of MS? And I said, yes, my mom and my sister. He was like, you need an MRI. He's like, we'll get you scheduled for one. He's like, but that's what's going to be needed. And so I think, it was pretty clear. He kind of thought he knew what was going on, in that moment. And with my mom and sister having it, it was kind of something that I'd always sort of feared, because while it's not genetic, or I'm sorry, it's not hereditary, they're genetic ties. So you're more likely to have MS if you've got family members who do. And so it was something I've kind of always been concerned-ish about.
It's always been in the back of your mind.
Yeah. And so, it was pretty clear from him that, he kind of thought that's what was going on. Went and did the MRI. They only did a brain MRI. And so that happened. And that's when I reached out to Dr. Badass and I said, hey, this was my experience with this doctor. I need some help because this is what's going on. And, I know this is her, because she's like, okay, she was TDY at the time, and she said, okay, meet me at the office on this day at this time. And so I went over there, and she spent about 2.5, 3 hours with me talking through every seemingly unconnected thing that I was going through and experiencing, and wrote down what it was, wrote down the thing that she was going to test, and wrote down what that might mean depending on how the test came out, and then gave it to me. So I knew the roadmap and the plan for what we were going to do, which was huge. Like, you don't get 2.5 hour, doctor appointments,
I've seen her
civilian,
treat
military.
people. She's immensely thorough.
Yeah.
And we'll take that time.
Yes. And that was her time that she gave to me to go through all of that. And she ended up ordering a spine MRI too, because she was like, the brain's good. Let's check the spine one. And so the brain one came back, and they read it and they said, okay, it's clear. And so they're like, okay, so probably not MS, because typically you won't have lesions in the spine and not in the brain. And kind of how you talked earlier, MS is the body's immune system attacks the myelin sheath on the nerve endings in your central nervous system. And so the lesions are the damage. So much like you would get a bruise or a scab on your knee, that is what they'll see on these MRIs, is that damage to the myelin sheath. And so the brain one came back. They said, okay, probably not MS if this is clear, because you probably aren't going to have anything on your spine and not in the brain. Well, the spine one comes back, and there's a very, very, very bright return. And so difficult in that if it's bright, it's an active lesion. So there is an active attack going on. And so the fact that at this point, about 70% of my body had gone numb. So like elbow to elbow, everything south had gone like pins and needles numb. And so that was that active lesion in my spinal cord. And then they went back and looked at the brain and said, oh, there's 2 lesions in here. They were just a kind of dull return because they were inactive lesions. So a previous attack that I had that was kind of undiagnosed, unrecognized. And so ended up kind of figuring out that like the pain in my side was potentially the first symptom that we could have caught, something called MS hug. And I don't know what, and I'm going to cuss now, I don't know what asshole named it that, because it's not, it does not feel like a hug.
What an asshole.
I know, right?
MS hug?
Yeah.
Bro,
Yeah.
what is he doing?
So it's, it's
That's a hug I don't want.
No, it's pretty terrible, pretty painful.
Is that like the brain to gut connection that causes the pain there, or why that spot?
So the complicated thing about MS is that because it attacks nerves in your central nervous system, it could affect a ton of things, because what we're talking about is the messages being transferred through your nervous system for your body to function. So, if you're telling your leg to move, if the pathway for that message to get there has been either cut off, blocked, damaged, slowed, that function will not then necessarily work correctly. And so that's one of the common things. So MS hug and numbness are 2 of the kind of common early signs. Optic neuritis is another one that's a very common first sign. But it's difficult to diagnose because you have to confirm it in both time and space. So time being like, okay, I had some old attacks, I've got a new one. Space being they need to confirm that it existed in multiple locations. And so one of the major ways they do that is through your spinal fluid. So I had to go down to Brooke Army Medical Center and have a spinal tap or a lumbar puncture. So I don't want to portray my experience with that first doctor as kind of standard, because obviously I found my Dr. Badass, and she's been an absolute godsend. And then my doctor down at BAMC, or Brooke Army Medical Center, that did my spinal tap was unreal good. When I talked to him, I was like, obviously very nervous about this thing. And he said, look, I love doing these things. And I said, well, now I'm going to worry about your mental state, that you like stabbing people in their spinal cord and taking their spinal fluid. But he said, typically you love things that you're good at. He's like, I'm very good at this. And he was very good at it. The only pain I felt was the lidocaine shot to numb my back, which just felt like kind of a punch of electricity really quick, and then it was over. So, because I asked my sister, because she had to do this, I was like, what was it like? And she said, so for any of the ladies out there that have had an epidural, that have gotten the lidocaine shot, apparently very similar. And that was all I felt. The recovery was tenderness and sore, but he was masterful in doing this. And
during this whole process, are you still not on the flying status?
Correct. So yeah, as soon as I went to the ER, you become down automatically until they can bring you up and confirm whatever you went to the ER for is now resolved, which obviously they couldn't do. And so yeah, I got back from that TDY at the very end of September, beginning of October of 2020, and I have not flown since then in the military. And so, yeah, down status this whole time, traveling to figure out this diagnosis. The doctor was super cool because he actually let my husband assist with the spinal tap.
Oh, nice.
Man, that was a master class in leadership. It was really cool because there's a lot of risk. I mean, the needle is like ginormous long that they use, and there's obviously a risk of infection. You got to be very sterile. You're kind of messing with the pressures in your spinal column, and so it's a very sensitive procedure, but if it's done right, very, very safe. And really, I felt nothing other than the initial numbing shot, but he was having my husband assist him, and he was like really gentle and kind of like explaining what was going on. But then the times where like they needed to be very careful, he was very firm, like, okay, do not move. Do not touch this thing. Only put your hand here. And I was like, that's some leadership right there. Like,
this dude knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
He knows when he needs to turn it on.
Yes.
Which is a life or death, situation. You got to turn it on. So
he was fantastic. So yeah, they did that. And so they test for a couple things. And one of the things is an indication of MS within the spinal fluid, which it took a few months or a few weeks, I should say, to get the results back. But, was just kind of waiting for that final confirmation. And got the call that, yes, it was present in my spinal fluid as well. And so confirmed the diagnosis in December of 2020, and pretty immediately started a steroid treatment. So when you have an active attack, they'll typically do high intensity steroids to reduce the inflammation and calm down that attack. And so I did a week of really high intensity steroids, which, when they say steroids are bad and drugs are bad, let me tell you, like that was, just extreme levels of energy, and then like really, really, really tired.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely freezing one moment, like raging hot the next moment.
Like clearly something foreign is in you.
Oh my gosh.
That's just running amok.
Yeah, I broke out everywhere and in very bizarre places, like my scalp and my ears. Like it clearly, my body was like, what in the world have you done to me? It wasn't good. But it was pretty successful in that at this point, 70% of my body was numb. And so all of that has now recovered with the exception of my forearms and my hands, which are still to this day have that pins and needles numb.
Like right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So that's probably something that will never recover. Perhaps if I had been diagnosed a little bit quicker, if I had been, had been taken seriously a little bit more quickly, maybe it would have recovered. I can't say one way or another for sure on that one, but that's something that I'm probably going to have the rest of my life. And that's what you see a lot with MS, is that if there is damage, like typically it's not easy to reverse or recover something like that. So I'm lucky that most of it did recover. But yeah, that's something I'll probably always have.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez. What about a resurgence of it? How do you prevent that?
So it depends on how you kind of approach your treatment. And so some people treat it with a very extreme diet. I am a total foodie, and there's no universe in which that will ever work for me. And thank God there is some incredible medical treatments right now in medicine. When my mom was first diagnosed, there was, it was like, you've got MS, good luck. There really wasn't much. And then more when my sister got diagnosed, and then now I am on the treatment called Ocrevus. Once you hear the word, you'll see those commercials like all the time
So
now.
Ocrevus.
Yeah.
So now that you've said Ocrevus.
Yes. Yeah. You'll notice it's on like Netflix and on your TV, like tons and tons and tons of commercials.
Wow. Okay.
That is the commercial name for it. It's ocrelizumab. I'm sure you're much better at saying the official medical name of medications. But so what that does, the specific one that I've chosen, and there's lots of options depending on some of the things with your disease. There's one of the things that they test in your spinal fluid is for the presence of what's called the John Cunningham virus or the JC virus. Typically, our immune system keeps that at bay. But if you degrade your immune system, that virus can then take hold and you get what's called PML, which there's no way I can remember what that acronym is. But that is very, 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 very serious and is almost 100% fatal. And so 98% of the population have the JC virus in their system. Like it's just kind of a very, very common thing. It's in there, but your immune system keeps it latent.
I think that happened to my neighbor. He's a tech sergeant, and some virus that you're having immunity towards like overtook his system, and he almost lost his life. He was in the ER. It was like this whole thing.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure I've known someone who's been through that, but he did survive.
It's possible. You know, again, weird synchronicity of things. I was a massive fan of the Real World San Francisco when I was growing up because it had Pedro Zamora on there. Who was, one of the first, I think, gay people that was on a TV show, and showed him with his.
Did he pass away?
He did, and he passed away from PML because of the JC virus. And so just crazy because they were just a beautiful couple that I just grew up, kind of helped.
Hey, you're speaking to my soul.
Yeah,
I'm a real world guy. I love the real world.
Yeah.
My favorite real world character or person, CT.
CT. Oh my God. Yeah. Have you watched all the challenges?
Yes. When he's on steroids? Oh my God. There's no stopping that man.
I'll tell you, steroids are bad.
He got in trouble. You know, he lost his mind for a while, but he came back steroid free, and then he won again. Yeah. Natural. But steroids aside, CT's built different.
Yes.
I mean, we can all agree on that.
He's got a good heart. Little bit, intense, but the heart deep down.
And Johnny Bananas.
Yes.
Love Johnny Bananas. Oh my gosh. I love the real world so much. I remember even way back in the day, Cyrus.
Yep. Yeah. I love Road Rules with
remember
Mark.
The slap, the famous slap.
Yes.
With the girl who had Lyme disease.
Yeah.
She has a podcast now.
Really?
I randomly Googled her the other day.
Oh, that's crazy.
I got her name, so I Googled her name. Like, where is this girl? She has a podcast now.
Yeah.
She just started it like a year ago. She's. I might have her on HeroFront.
Do it. Yeah, it's super interesting because Lyme disease and MS look very, very, very similar. And sometimes you'll get diagnosed with one and it's really the other. And it sometimes can take a while to figure out the difference between the two. And in fact, the first female Thunderbird pilot, Nicole Malachowski, has Lyme disease. And that's ultimately what she had to leave the Air Force for, was her Lyme disease was extremely intense. Like, she was working as an intern for Michelle Obama and couldn't walk and was having trouble thinking and got really intense and really bad. And so now she's a public speaker and talks a lot about her Lyme disease.
I follow her on Instagram, and of course I wanted to invite her on here because she's amazing at she just does a lot of stuff. I didn't know that about the Lyme disease, though. I had no idea.
Yeah, so she talks a lot about that and like the kind of lack of knowledge of tick-borne illness. But Lyme disease and MS present very similarly. I had a friend who was initially diagnosed with MS, and then they figured out she had Lyme disease. Lyme disease, not good.
Serious stuff. No, I'm in public health, so that's part of what we track, and it's a very serious thing.
Yeah,
it's freaked me out and made me wear bug spray and cover my legs and everything because it's dangerous. It's very dangerous.
Yeah. Reach out to her. I mean, I'm sure she'd love to talk, especially from a public health perspective in the Lyme disease. She's a pretty passionate advocate for education on that. Pedro ultimately died from PML and the JC virus because, like, when you have HIV and AIDS,
the immune system went away.
Yeah, when they talk about the T cells, and the concern about the T cell count, it's because part of the reason is because that PML can take hold, or JC virus can take hold, and you get PML. And so it informs you what you can and can't do. Like, you can't do some of the more extreme MS treatments if you've got the JC virus, which I have it in my system. And so Ocrevus, which is what I'm on, attacks the B cells. So B cells, T cells. The T cells are actually the ones that do the attacking, but they found that when you eradicate the B cells, the T cells for some reason decide to calm down and don't attack your immune system.
That is bizarre.
And so the treatment kills my B cells, which, again, timing and synchronicity, very funny, because B cells are what create antibodies in your body. And so the time that we had decided that this was the best treatment, because it's really good in terms of the most long-term quality of life for people with MS, what they've seen is that it is very effective at halting the progression of the disease. You're not going to cure it, but you can slow it down significantly. And so they've kind of seen that this is very effective for that. And so nukes the B cells, decided on this treatment. COVID, they had just come out with a COVID vaccine. And so I ended up deciding to delay starting my treatment so that I could get the first 2 doses of the COVID vaccine so that my body could build the antibodies for it before I didn't have B cells and could make antibodies.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
So that one became very important to me. And again, thank God for public health. Doc Boom, who's actually, I think she's coming down to Eglin or Hurlburt here shortly. She was our public health person out at Cannon. And between her and Dr. Badass, they secured me the first dose of the vaccine that we got out at Cannon, because it first went to medical providers. And then I was the first non-medical person to get it, because we were like, I need to take this now. I need to start my treatment now, because the concern is that you'll have another attack or episode. And so poor Doc Badass, she was really concerned about me waiting. But I was like, look, I want to be deployable. In the future, this might be an issue. This is before we really knew a ton about what the requirements were going to be. But I was like, I am worried that I might not be deployable if I don't have this vaccine. And so I delayed, got both doses, timed it, and then I started my treatment and eradicated my B cells. And so now my body, like, vaccines aren't particularly effective. So I time it now. You do Ocrevus twice a year. And so I'll time it. So I'll do a vaccine like about 2 weeks before I need to do my next treatment, so that, like, my body's probably started to produce some B cells again. And so I can maybe eke out a few antibodies. But basically it makes you immunocompromised. And so dealing with COVID's been really interesting. It really was only very recently that I stopped wearing a mask, just because I was like, I got enough issues. I don't want to add COVID to this situation. And so you got to be really, really careful. And I've been careful, very careful, as I could in this situation. But that is the hope, is that then because you're kind of calming down the T cells by the removal of the B cells, that you won't have more attacks. And so there's actually a very realistic hope that I could not have another attack. Now there's standard symptoms and stuff that you have, and obviously I've still got the numbness in my hands and arms, which is probably never going to go away. But at least hopefully not another attack, not another progression, because we talked about it being the Snowflake disease, because there are some people that it's very serious, and like they can't walk, in a wheelchair, they can't work, it can potentially kill you, so it can be very, very, very serious. There are some people that like they had one small episode and then really nothing, so it's really kind of very different. So if you know someone who has MS in your life, you know what they've been through. You don't know what anyone else with MS has been through. Because my mom, my sister, and I are all very different in terms of...
so it's very hard to treat, too. I mean, think about it from a provider perspective. They might have treated one person with it, and they may not even be able to apply those same lessons to someone else because it's a different type of case.
So the treatment, because there's a ton of variety in treatment, and there's a lot of options, which thank God for modern medicine and all the things that they can do. I had a ton of choices. But the symptoms are what's difficult, because, for one person, you might experience the numbness. For one person, you might experience difficult with walking. For some person, like the mood is an issue. And that's kind of one of the things I'm working through right now, again, in the hopes of being like kind of transparent and talking about mental health. Your emotional range kind of expands. And so like normally, like, Again, I'm a crier, but like now the things that like make me cry are just much less, where like I'll just get emotional for things where I'm like, I'm not actually as emotionally connected to the situation as what is occurring on my face right now, with the tear. Like, so it's weird that like that emotional reaction would happen. And then irritation gets larger, like little things will irritate me a lot more easily than I'm like, I am mad about something that makes no sense for me to be mad about right now. And so, again, having Dr. Badass as a fierce advocate is amazing, because we're kind of working through what the like mental health drugs look like for that, while feeling as a pilot very uncomfortable saying that I'm taking a mental health drug. And granted, I got my degree in psychology, like I'm massively supportive of it, but these are the things that you're always concerned about for your career. And so kind of working through that symptom that I have in particular. And then for me, weight gain was a, big, pun intended, problem for me. And kind of one of the things I think we have trouble with, both within the military medicine system and just really medical in general, because I would have doctor's appointments and they would say, oh, have you noticed any sudden weight loss? And I would look at them and I'd look at me and I'd look at them. I'm like, no, man. No, I have not had any sudden weight loss.
How do I get that symptom? Give me that symptom.
Yes, please.
I have hypothyroidism.
Yeah.
My dad has that, and so that's what led me to getting that early diagnosis. I got it at like 25, which is very rare. No doctor would even consider a male at 25.
Yeah.
But because I said my dad had it, they tested it, and I treated it early. But I can't eat. I have to watch what I eat.
Yeah.
It's pill or not, that Synthroid I take every morning, it doesn't matter. My metabolism is like, peace out.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I feel your pain. It's brutal to go from like, your body, what you can eat, what you can't eat. And then suddenly it's like, that just goes out the window.
Yeah.
It's like the weight of the food is now a part of you.
Yeah. And kind of our inability to recognize weight gain as a symptom. Because, it really took me coming to Dr. Badass, and like I really broke down in her office, because, we're kind of talking through all the symptoms and treating it, and like talking through the med process and the med board. And I just felt like I wasn't in control of my body anymore. I wasn't in control of my life. I wasn't in control of my career. And the weight gain was such an outwardly visible symptom that I couldn't immediately explain to people. And so here I am in uniform with like, a significant amount of extra weight, feeling like I'm a shitbag, or I look like a shitbag because I am heavier, but not being able to say, well, it's because I've got this disease. You can't.
Yeah, that's tough. That's very tough.
And so just, struggling with a lot of kind of self-doubt and self-consciousness about that was really difficult. And so I broke down to Dr. Badass, and I was like, I'm out. I don't have control of anything anymore. And now, like, I am gaining weight at a ridiculous rate. I can do nothing about this. It's not stopping, and I don't know what to do about this. And she said, this is a symptom of your condition. like for me specifically, my body said, you know, it'd be super cool. Let's just retain all the fuel that we can to protect ourselves from possible attack, which logically makes sense, but that's in the form of fat. So
Gotcha.
it just kept storing and producing fuel and fat, and nothing I was doing in terms of diet and exercise was going to impact it. She's like, you cannot change this because of what your body has decided it's going to do. It's reset itself to a new normal, and you're not going to be able to do anything about this. And so she said, we're going to need to medicate this. And so, again, thank God for her, because she advocated fiercely for it, because it's not a common thing that we'll prescribe within the military, is weight loss medication. And so it took some work and some difficulty to make it happen. But again, she's incredible and was able to advocate for it. And unfortunately, you're only allowed to take it for about 6 months, and then you just have to stop. But I lost almost 45 pounds in 6 months.
Was it that medication that also treats like diabetes or something? Was it that one, or was it like a stimulant?
So it was phentermine, which I just share because it's I had a abnormally successful reaction to it, and again, losing 45 pounds in less than 6 months, it was really, she said, you know, that's confirmation that was your body, that was not you. You know, sometimes it does not come down to willpower
Right.
as far as weight loss goes,
which is super frustrating when you have a lot of willpower, and it's not working.
Yeah, and I've shared that, and it's amazing how many people have responded and been like, I'm going through the same thing. I'm struggling. I work out like 7 times a week. I eat less than this number of calories. I'm doing all of these things, and yet I can't lose weight, or I'm gaining weight. And, you know, I'm looked at as if I'm somehow morally failing in this area. And so that was kind of a struggle for me. And I just thank God that I had my Dr. Badass, who was like, you know, this is a symptom, and we're going to treat it the way you would treat a symptom of any sort of condition.
Wow. Good on her for that approach, because, again, that's another stigma that, you know, other people might have, where they won't even consider that as an option.
Exactly. And the fact that was constantly the question was, have you experienced weight loss, not have you experienced weight gain?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow. All right. Well, you ready to close this thing out?
Yeah. like 4 hours
I think
later
I am going to do a 2-part series for this because I want people to listen to the whole thing. And if I make it the whole thing, I worry that people would cut out.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
so I will make this 1 week, one half, the second week, the other half.
Yeah. And not sad if you had anything out. I've just been enjoying, you know, this great conversation with you, and getting to know you and learn more about you, and kind of, you know, hopefully share the stories about what I've been through to hopefully provide some hope to some other folks out there. Because, you know, going through some of the things I have in my career, the challenges, the barriers, you know, the health stuff, going through a medical evaluation has been a lot. And I want people to have the hope out there that, like, you can face all these things and continue to have a career, and a successful career.
I mean, look at you. Look at you. You're not giving up.
I'm not giving up, you know. It's just very funny how constantly the Air Force is like, yeah, maybe you're not for us. And I just don't listen.
Hey, Air Force, if you're listening, I don't know if you got an AI out there or what, but if you're listening, Kate, we need you. We need you. We need you. We need people like you. Holy cow. Your grit, your resilience is just unreal, what you've been able to accomplish. Seriously.
Or stubbornness, you know, potato.
You can call them many things. But so the last question I have for you before we close this out is our last topic. Mm-hmm. So my last question is, with this diagnosis, with you having your medical, you know, fate thrown up in the air, not really sure how it's going to play out sometimes, which is really scary, you make a point to make every day count, because you don't know if one day they're going to say, hey, the board met and, you know, you have to medically retire. You don't really know what's going to happen sometimes. That unknown is terrifying, but you choose to make each day count. So how does one do that? You know, with this medical condition looming over you, how does Kate make each day count going forward?
Yeah, and going through the board process was interesting, and I say medical board, and really I never even met the medical board because what a lot of people don't know is there's multiple steps in it, and the very first step is called the IRILO, or the initial review in lieu of, and then if they decide to refer you to a medical board, that's where an official MEB starts, which is what people kind of commonly refer to as the medical evaluation process. And for me, I went to the IRILO, and they returned me to duty, which is unheard of for a pilot with MS.
So how did that happen?
Again, my Dr. Badass. So one of the things that you have to do is this thing called a NARSUM, or a narrative summary. And so they kind of explain your condition, what you're going through, what your symptoms are, and kind of give an assessment of how they think that you'll be able to serve, or if it's best for you to medically retire, if it's just not conducive to military service. And so my Dr. Badass wrote just this incredible NARSUM about, honestly, what I've been going through and my symptoms, but then all the things, again, that I've been doing while going through this to try and make the Air Force better. And that, she said I'm value added, and that I need to stay in. My squadron commander, or I guess deck commander, Pete Shelton, and then my prior squadron commander when I got my original diagnosis, Lieutenant Colonel Robertson, wrote me letters of support saying, yes, we've seen her performance, she should stay in the military. And then, again, Lieutenant General Slife wrote me probably the single best letter of support I've ever seen in my life. I mean,
so like your work ethic, your grit, everything that makes you, people went to bat for that.
Yeah, I am so lucky that I have had these people in my life, and so lucky to have, my two commanders, and then, who was my MAJCOM commander at the time, really advocate and fight for me, which was just pivotal. And I think that's the reason why I got returned at such an early stage, and where I never even actually met a med board, which, again, was crazy because Dr. Badass made sure that I could PCS here first. So typically when you get a diagnosis, you're like locked in place. You're not supposed to PCS or anything. And she's like, okay, we're going to hold off on that because you need to move to a location where you can go through the whole med board process. Because part of it is like a VA assessment of your disability, where, when and if they decide to medically retire you, you've already got that done. And so the whole time I was going through this is what we were prepping for. We knew I was going to go through the med board. I was, going to be declared unfit for duty. I was going to have to go all the way to the final physical evaluation board, and I was going to have to go argue my case. I was going to have to get a military lawyer to argue why I should stay in. And then I got returned at the very first stage in it, which was just bonkers. We had been preparing for this battle this whole time, and then get returned at the IRILO was just unreal, and amazing to get to share that news with those people who went to bat for me, which, I still can't even believe that happened.
It's amazing.
And then they evaluate you every single year, which totally makes sense because they want to make sure if there's been any sort of progression or condition changes, which maybe needs to be reassessed to see if you're still fit for duty.
So this is where the make every day count really comes into play, because this is being looked at every year.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
And while I was going through the medical evaluation, they could have, I knew at any point it could be up and they could say, thank you for your service, you're going to medically retire. But now every single year they're going to they're going to reevaluate.
I was so focused on what you're saying. A balloon popped and it just scared the crap out of me. Oh my God.
There's a baby shower in the
There is.
Yes.
All right, continue. I'm sorry.
Right? PTSD is triggered. Right. But yeah, so every year they kind of reevaluate you, which makes sense, but it's also still very stressful because at any point they could say, it's time. And so for me, and I think what gets lost for a lot of people, I am so passionate because I know at any moment it could be over. This thing that I've wanted to do my entire life, the airmen I get to serve and the work that I get to do, it could be over at any point. And so for me, I know that I have to do everything in my power to keep contributing to the mission for the time that I do have. And so that's why I do things like start the Air Force Multiple Sclerosis support and information page to help other people. Why I do a lot of kind of recruiting events in terms of like doing Girls in Aviation Day or air shows or Girl Scouts or any sort of speaking thing where I can kind of try and feed into the Air Force that next generation that's going to make it better for everyone else. And why I've been the co-lead of the AFSOC Women's Initiatives team, or the AFSOC WIT, and then host our DAGGER Athena action event, where, again, we kind of talked earlier about the fact that we look at barriers to readiness. So anything that can increase operational readiness, reduce risk to force, risk to mission, increase recruitment and retention of the top talent, and then optimize our resources in the military. And that's through the lens of women-specific barriers. But a lot of the barriers that we look at actually end up benefiting a larger population in the Air Force, and frequently benefit everyone. It just may be something that's kind of predominantly impacts women service members. And so, we kind of work hand in hand with all of our MAJCOM staff, with the MAJCOM commander. Our senior champion is, in fact, our AFSOC command chief, Chief Master Sergeant Corey Olson, who we hand-selected, and we said, this is the right personality. This is a passionate advocate that's going to go to bat and understands the importance of these things, not necessarily even from a diversity and inclusion standpoint, because those things are great, but we're really not even talking about diversity and inclusion. We're talking about readiness. We're talking about having the top talent in the Air Force to be able to get after the mission and make sure that we are ready to defend freedom and democracy. And so Chief Corey Olson has been just incredible. He's retiring in a couple months. Again, still working on that sabotage plan. But then the whole staff of Air Force Special Operations Command has partnered with us, because some initiatives may have to deal with health, some may have to deal with equipment, some may deal with like manpower, and so all of those different agencies within the headquarters kind of help us develop and look at and say, okay, how do we best address this barrier to make it so that people can continue to serve and get us to be in a state of readiness where AFSOC has the competitive advantage when we're facing these peer and near-peer adversaries that are kind of threatening our democracy. And so just kind of passionately going after all of those things, because, again, at any point I could be done. And knowing that I've given everything I can is incredibly important to me, that the time that I do have, and God willing, I can make it to 20 and beyond. I've always said that they're going to have to remove me kicking and screaming. But
I believe that.
Yeah. For me, it's just so important to do everything I can, because I never know at what point I might no longer be in a position where I can make change for the better for our Air Force and AFSOC and for our airmen.
I can't picture you doing anything else either. You've convinced me. You made me a believer.
Yeah.
Okay, so, wow, we've had quite the journey.
Right.
We hit everything on this notes that I took.
Yeah.
Look at these notes. I've never taken notes like this. Never. But I met your energy, and you've got a lot of energy. You got a lot of passion. And so, before I give my final thought, if there is anyone that's listened to everything you had to say, and they're at the very end, and you'd like to give them, a final thought yourself, any last words for the talk, I'm going to give you that moment right now.
Yeah, I think go after what you're passionate about. I think that's kind of what my whole life and my service in the Air Force has been about. I've always been passionate about the Air Force. I've always been passionate about flying. I've always been passionate about our airmen and taking care of them and showing that I care. And all these obstacles and barriers and hurdles and twists and turns in my career have kind of boiled down to that. So you know who you are. You know what you bring to the fight. You know where you're meant to be. And don't let anyone or anything dissuade you, because if I am nothing else, I am proof positive that you can face a lot of adversity and challenges and keep serving. There is hope for those who may be diagnosed with something that is kind of going to throw them off their game, that there's potential to continue serving. There is hope for that. Hats off to the military for the fact that they are really looking at it with a critical eye right now to say, okay, does this make sense for them to keep serving? And they're, I think I'm proof that like they did a good job of saying, you know what, we know that you've got MS, but like you're able to contribute to the mission and we need you to keep contributing to the mission. So there's certainly hope there. For those who are compassionate, empathetic, emotional, or not, we need both of those. Like we absolutely need those who are the empathetic people. We need those who can just like look at a problem very critically and analytically. That's why we need all the top talent, because you need to be able to look at every problem from every perspective and every aspect. And then just, never leave an opportunity to make the Air Force or your world a better place, because it doesn't matter what is going on in your life. You never know when your time to contribute could be up. So, leave everything on the table and make sure you give everything that you can. And, believe in yourself and believe in your team. And when you invest in your people, you take care of your people, they'll take care of the mission.
Damn. Mic drop. But don't drop that. Just we'll pretend.
Yeah. It's a good disclaimer.
Right. They're fun to drop unless you bought them, and then you're like, wait a sec. I don't want to
feel so bad. Let's not do that.
But Kate, wow. I don't even know where. I usually have a really good final thought, but like, oh my goodness, that was intense. I feel like I know you better than most of my friends at this point because of everything that you shared with me. So we went through, and you took my 3 questions and made them into 3 things each.
I'm an overdoer. Like, it's kind of my thing.
You're the only one that's gotten. You got 9 questions on me at the Heroes. You volunteered for 9 questions. Actually, no. Then I gave you 1, so that's 10. You're the only one who's had 10 questions for the Heroes Gauntlet. 10.
If something's worth doing, it's worth overdoing.
The record before that was 6. You're at 10. So we went through your 3 favorite quotes. Who would play you in a movie? I think that one you kept to 1.
I had 2.
You had 2.
Yeah, that was good for me.
Okay. 3 proudest moments, and then I asked you about your favorite HeroFront episode, and then you asked me a question about my different career paths that in another universe I would have taken.
Yeah.
Faded memories. I'm out there killing it on stage somewhere.
That's right.
There's a universe out there where that's a thing.
Yeah.
I'm working on my 3rd studio album. Then we hit topic 1, your journey to commissioning, hearing no, the epic wing story, where after all that training, your husband finally, you made it at the last second, like something out of a movie with some corny 80s song. There's a dude with a boombox, you know what I'm saying?
Holding it over his head.
Holding it over his head, somewhere in the corner.
Yep.
So we went through that. We went through how you were the senior ranking member of that long class before you became an officer, and that intensely painful experience of losing your classmate Ben, which I thought was incredibly insightful, because we don't often get to hear what they're called is suicide survivors.
Yeah.
When you hear that, you think, oh, someone that attempted it and lived,
right.
But it actually means you were close to that person and were close to them in the time leading up to that really sad decision that they made.
Yeah.
We don't often get to hear that insight, right? Because it's either hard to say or shameful to say. Whatever the case, we don't often get to hear that perspective. But we got to hear it today, and I'm so proud of you for being able to say that, to tell that story for others to learn from. And then and the emotional side of you too, right? On how you you tried to blunt that, thinking that's not a strong leader.
Yep. And
you've since then see it totally differently, which I really admire you for that as well. We talked about MS, right? You've got to be one of very few that had a diagnosed MS and you're still active duty serving as an Air Force officer. How many people can say that? You're doing it. So the hope that you're giving people, not just with MS, but for other disqualifying factors, that, hey, maybe you could fight for this. Maybe you could make it work.
Yeah.
But part of that is also having a Dr. Badass. That helps, right? That helps. And so if you don't have that, if that person, if your provider isn't working, do what you did, switch it up.
Yeah.
You know,
I think she's the standard. You know, I don't want to imply anything from my one negative experience. We have got some phenomenal medical professionals in the Air Force and in the military, and I am beyond blessed to have a Dr. Badass. And so, go find it.
I used to be maintenance, and that was good, and that was also very challenging. It's a different culture, but I will say I love working with like medical professionals.
Yes.
They have just made me so much smarter, so much wiser, so much more confident. They just helped me tremendously. You know, people like her I get to look up to and work with. I mean, come on, it's amazing.
And we've seen that with the AFSOC WIT. Some of our initiatives, some of my favorite ones that we're working on are the ones that we're working with our Surgeon General. So Colonel Hansen, Colonel Chumley, Colonel Tilton.
I know Colonel Hansen.
Yeah, they are, man, they get it, and they are really good at working with us.
Did you know Chief Robbins?
I did not know.
No, he was at Herbert Field. He retired about 6 months ago.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
That was
tracking.
Remember when I told you I called my commander mom? Mm-hmm. He was the chief then.
Oh, that's awesome.
So he was the chief that I worked for. So he was like a mentor of mine as well.
Yeah.
And he lives in Navarre. So I got to go see him sometime.
Yeah. The AFSOC SG, they're great.
Yeah, he wanted to retire in AFSOC. He's a freaking badass. Yeah. He had all these war stories. He's not the average medic. The guy he was captured. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, we need to talk more. Yeah.
This dude was captured. There's a photo of him with a beard trying to be incognito, locked up.
Amazing. Yeah.
In another country. So I'll leave it at that.
We need story time after this. Yeah.
And so then we went into making each day count. On all the incredible things, the advocacy events that you put on, the MS Support and Info Group, co-leading the AFSOC Women's Initiative Team in DAGGER Athena. By the way, DAGGER Athena. Yes. That should be the band name.
There you go.
DAGGER Athena, dude?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's the most badass name I've ever heard. DAGGER Athena?
And
sign me up.
Shout out to the other MAJCOMs. So it started with Sword Athena in ACC. There's Reach Athena in AMC. There's Torch Athena in AETC. Strike Athena in Global Strike Command. And so these are initiatives within all of the MAJCOMs to kind of get after readiness barriers that kind of predominantly affect women. And so incredible network that we have. And so within AFSOC, our action event is called DAGGER Athena. And so we're pretty excited to get after that, especially with our other Athena partners in the MAJCOMs, and then working the AFSOC WIT, which is the actual team in the organization, with the DAF WIT, the DAF Department of the Air Force Women's Initiative teams. Incredible leaders of Major Megan Biles, Major Sam Sliney, Major Aaliyah Nadeem, Jessica Ruttenberg, just tons and tons and tons of people who are just working to make the Air Force better. So thrilled and lucky to be part of that too.
Wow. And I think we're at a good stopping point too, because this...
I know. There's an epic shower.
If you're not watching, the baby shower just got margaritas from next... There's margaritas in the Black Rifle. Is this a private event?
I don't know that, but that's how you do a baby shower, right? I'm going to take some cues from that. That's a heck of a margarita.
I think this is a private event.
Yeah. I think they'll let us join in.
Well, they know me, so they're probably like, nah.
Yeah.
Just let them do it. Just let them sit there.
That's right.
But, Huh? Oh, no. Can you hear me?
As long as they share, we're good.
Right. Let's get some nachos on the way out.
Right.
So, I go over all that just to say that, Kate, I think you're an incredible person. I am absolutely blown away by your life story. Truly. I think your parents did a phenomenal job with raising you. Your dad was a Vietnam hero.
Yep.
And I say hero for anyone that was in Vietnam, because let's be real, that was no joke.
Yeah.
So props to your parents, props to your dad for being a hero, your guiding light, your first mentor, taking you to the air show. And I would have quit, and most people would have quit at any one of these steps. This could have broke you. It could have derailed your whole thing. And you could have just, not pursued any of that. You could have just taken the easy way. And the reason you're successful is your ability to not quit on yourself. That's your success story. You don't quit.
No.
You keep fighting.
Yeah. And I don't want to pretend like there weren't many a time when I wanted to. You know, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I've been strong throughout. There have been so many moments of weakness where all I wanted to do was give up and take the easy way out. But again, it's, you know, we've talked about it extensively today. It's all those people that have supported me and held me up, between my friends, my doctors, my leadership, my husband. It's only because of them that I've been able to keep going, because I had plenty of moments of weakness where I wanted to give up, and I might have if I hadn't had those people in my life supporting me. So it is certainly my stubbornness, but also the folks that I am lucky enough to call my friends and my family.
Yeah, as far as your experiences and the character that's instilled in you, you know, coming from an enlisted perspective and senior NCO, I would. You were the best officer that I could ever imagine working for. The qualities that you have are just unbelievable. From the people that you've helped, from your vulnerability, you've somehow taken all those things and it's shaped you into one incredible officer. And we are just so incredibly blessed to have you on our side.
I'm glad I've successfully fooled you, and hopefully I can keep fooling other folks along the way.
You keep saying that, but in all seriousness, though, like you're a gift for us. And you know, I had a lack of officer interaction so far. I think Dario was one of the only few that I've had on here, which ironically, you know that person. Yeah.
And you had the medical person who's going to go do the commissioning. She was going to be a nurse in commissioning. She hadn't yet.
And then there's also General Goldfein.
Yes. You know, no big deal. Yeah.
But there's still not a lot of officers. There's still not a lot. In comparison, there wasn't a lot. But I got to say, you freaking brought it.
More than you ever asked for.
You showed up and you brought it. You made up for what I was missing. You made up for it, like hardcore. And I'm going to give you a 2-part series.
I mean, what choice do you have at this point?
I don't. I can't upload a file that large. No. I have to split it up.
I probably owe you some money for your server size that you're going to need to increase.
Right. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I need a tip for the server increase. Absolutely. No.
We'll have to get you a Patreon to start.
I need a freaking Patreon, dude. Oh my God. Yeah, I need a tip jar is what I need. But Kate, I just want to tell you thank you. Thank you for being you, for kicking ass, for being on our team. Thank you for being vulnerable, sharing all these stories, not just the good, not just the bad, but also the ugly, the hard stuff. You talked about it today. Was coming on HeroFront as an active listener, was coming on HeroFront everything that you'd hoped it would be?
That and more. And I just have to thank you for what you do. And you know, we joke about, the lack of officers on there, but I can't tell you how much it's meant to me to listen to so many amazing stories from our enlisted airmen, and the resource and the mentorship that I have gained from that, is pretty, incredible for me, especially as a pilot. We don't get a lot of opportunities, to lead as many airmen as we would like. And so that mentorship, through your podcast has been amazing. Hearing their stories has been just so motivational, and more than that, inspirational. And you do that. You bring that out. You have made it so that we've sat here and talked for 68 hours about my life, your life, our journeys, and it really just felt like a conversation that I was having with an old friend. And so barely feel like this has been something that's recorded for other people's consumption. Just this great, positive, wonderful conversation. And at the end of the day, my only hope, and I know your hope, is that this will just help other airmen, other people to be inspired and know that they can do it when they face difficulties. And you are certainly a testimony to that. And then the fact that through your work, you highlight those who are doing the same thing. So kudos to you, and thank you for having me. Thank you to Dr. Badass for, creating this connection for us. And just thank you for what you do. Cannot overstate the value of what it has meant to me and what I know it means to so many airmen, so many officers, so many public listeners. So thank you.
Kate, that means the world to me, seriously.
Yeah.
You're one of my favorite listeners ever, just because you're so nice. And you've listened to so many episodes. I mean, that's the best compliment I could ever have. All right, y'all. Well, we were live from Black Rifle, and this was the hero's journey of Kate Hewlett.
We did it, y'all. We did it. 3-part series in the book with an incredible hero, Kate Hewlett. And again, I want to thank you, Kate. I know you're listening to this. I want to thank you for being so completely transparent and vulnerable in the hopes that it touches someone out there, even one person. You know, you didn't just talk about the good times, but you talked about a lot of your struggles and a lot of dark moments in your life, which I think is super important, because when people see you on the outside, sometimes I just think you got it all together. They think you're just killing it, and they don't realize the steps that you had to take to get to that point. And I think it really humanizes us when we share those struggles in a safe place like a podcast. I also want to thank all the listeners who went with us on this journey and who will continue to support Team HeroFront. It has absolutely changed my life. The people that I've met, the places that I've been, the mentors that I have in my life, and of course, all the people who we've touched and the feedback that they've given me, the private messages that I've had saying they don't feel alone anymore. I want y'all to know, especially the guests that come on, that I've come to realize the feedback that we get, even online, is probably 1% of the total amount of people who have listened and have thoughts or feelings about those episodes. The reach is absolutely tremendous, and it gives us common ground. It gives us talking points. It allows us to get to know each other before we even physically meet. And with what little time we have in the Air Force and on this earth, what an incredible way to get to know our brothers and sisters around us. Thank you to Kate. Thank you to her husband for letting me borrow her for an entire day at Black Rifle. And thank you, the listener, for all the support that you have given myself and HeroFront over the past 3 years. I love all of you. I can't wait to see where this keeps going. And I hope to see you soon. Take care, everyone.